But first, we're learning more about the man accused of gunning down 6 of his co-workers at a Walmart in Virginia. Police say 31-year-old Andre Bing legally purchased the gun used in the massacre on the morning of the shooting. They also located on his cell phone what appears to be a note complaining about his job and alleged harassment from co-workers. He was a store manager at the Walmart and took his own life after the rampage. President Biden called for stronger gun control measures yesterday.
The idea we still allow semi-automatic weapons to be purchased is sick. It's just sick. It has no social redeeming value. Zero, none. Not a single solitary rationale for it except profit for the gun manufacturer.
Can you do anything about gun laws during the lame duck, sir?
I'm going to try.
Legislative action on guns will be harder when Republicans take control of the House in the new year. For more on this, let's bring in Nancy Cordes. She's in Nantucket, where the Bidens are spending the holiday weekend. Nancy, thanks for joining us. After the latest series of high-profile mass shootings, the president is calling for an assault weapons ban. But what are the chances of that actually happening in a lame duck session and then when Republicans take control of the House?
The chances are extremely slim, Omar, during both the lame duck session and certainly when Republicans take control of the House in January. And the reality is that if the president had the votes to do this, he would have done it sometime over the last 2 years. But the problem is he would need 60 votes in the Senate. That means he would need all 50 Democrats to vote yes, plus 10 Republicans. He has never had those numbers, and he's unlikely to have those numbers unless there is some kind of seismic shift in the political lay of the land in Washington, D.C. It doesn't mean he's going to stop trying, and certainly you heard some really strong language from him that you played just a moment ago, talking about the fact that there's no redeeming value in allowing semi-automatic and automatic weapons to be sold in the U.S. at this point. We've seen him ratchet up that language over time. He managed to pass some modest gun control legislation over the course of the first half of his first term. That was pretty notable. We haven't seen the two sides be able to agree before, but nothing like a sweeping assault weapons ban that he would like to pass if he could.
Looking ahead, when the GOP takes over the House next year, they plan to launch a series of investigations, and we've heard Kevin McCarthy talking about this. What's the Republicans' goal here?
The goal is to flood the zone with all kinds of investigations. Some the White House views as legitimate, some the White House views as less so. Republicans say they've been wanting to investigate things like the drawdown of U.S. troops in Afghanistan and how chaotic it was. They want to investigate the origins of COVID. They also want to investigate the president's family, notably his son, Hunter Biden. And so this is something that they plan to do immediately once they take control of the House in January. They've already been making plans, divvying up who does what. And the White House is going to have some very difficult decisions to make about how far it's going to go to cooperate with these various investigations and whether it cooperates with some and not others, because there are going to be subpoenas. There are going to be requests and demands for administration officials to testify. So it's going to be a very different landscape for this president, for his top officials, than we saw over the past 2 years when their party was in control of both the House and the Senate. They could block those kinds of investigations.
And switching gears here, Nancy, crises don't seem to take a holiday off. President Biden said he and his administration are involved in negotiations to avert a looming U.S. railroad strike. What can you tell us about those talks?
Well, the president says that some of his top officials, the labor secretary, for example, are engaged in those negotiations after some unions involved in the talks rejected the new set of agreements that was hammered out just last month. And so now it has put this whole agreement back into question. And we're now facing, once again, the prospect of a looming strike. The president said he himself has not engaged in the talks just yet, but he is working with his team and keeping abreast of the issue because, he did something of a victory lap a month ago, basically saying that this crisis had been averted. And now the crisis is looming once again. So a big problem on his plate, even as he tries to enjoy a few days with family here in Nantucket.
Well, based on your surroundings, obviously you're not in D.C. What is on the president's agenda for the rest of the weekend?
Not much publicly. He does have a lot of grandkids here, lots of family, and so he's going to be spending time with them. He has said, and his aides have said, that he's going to talk with them over the weekend about running for re-election before coming to a final decision about that sometime by the new year. And there's a big Christmas tree lighting here in town that he tends to enjoy attending, and so it's possible that that could be on the agenda as well. But other than that, just a lot of downtime here with family.
And probably an ice cream involved. Nancy in Nantucket, thank you very much.